inspired, get motivated with Maya Akai and the Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find Maya on Twitter and Instagram at Maya_Akai. On Facebook at Maya Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything Maya at MayaAkai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to what is like the 77th episode of Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, which I like to say that this is a podcast that looks to embrace the topic of mental wellness from a fresh and forward-thinking perspective. The focus of my podcast is to pull back that veil of self-doubt and sabotage that so many of us have in our lives, to be able to help us to identify the ambition and harness the motivation more than anything else, to motivate us, to help yield that satisfaction that you want to have success in not just life, but your everyday life. So with that being said, if you are a first-time listener and or viewer, it's okay. I always just say, buckle up for safety. Not because, we get rough here, but, you might have an unexpected epiphany in the conversations that I have with my guests, and you'll go, wow, I didn't think about that. I always like to say, things that make you go, Now, if you're my age, you know that song, but if you're not, you don't. So I'm going to tell you, go Google CNC Music Factory, and it'll come up for you. Good song, by the way. But with that also being said, if you're a returning listener, you know how we do things here. Pretty much you carve out this 30 to 60 minutes of your time to discuss something that's really important and forward thinking. So I always tell people, go ahead, grab a pencil and paper, jot down some thoughts or things you may have. And of course, when I have guests on, they're definitely going to be sharing some really good things with you. So just make sure that you go ahead and you jot some things down. That is the big thing. Now, like I said, we are pretty much like into episode 77. So that means we've covered quite a bit of ground. If you happen to miss any of those episodes, don't fret. You can always find episodes of Maya on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify. If it's a podcast platform, most of the time you can find my podcast there. Just search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and you should be able to find it. But I'm going to tell you, just go ahead and make life easy on yourself and subscribe and share my YouTube channel, which is Maya Speaks to You. And I would say, finally, people who know me, I got my social media game up to speed. So now it's a shared platform. So whether you are on Facebook, IG, or X, you could always just go ahead and search Maya Speaks to You, and you can follow me that way as well. Of course, I'm going to be shameless and tell you that you should subscribe and like my website, which is maya-speaks.com, for all things that are Maya. There's two things on that website that I particularly I'm just really, really passionate about. One, I do an inspirational blog only once a week. So I put a thought up there that I just want you to process. I'm not going to throw something at you every day, just once a week. So new postings go up on Wednesday, as well as I have my Me on Pause blog. For everyone who knows me, I am the poster child for menopause. So I created a blog for all of my ladies who are experiencing menopause with some really, really insightful things that could be very helpful as you are going through the transition more than anything else. So you can always find those particular things on my website. Now, before we jump into our next guest, I absolutely have to say, if you did not get a chance to see our last episode, it was fantastic. It was about understanding the wealth gap. And we had a fantastic guest on who shared a lot of key things. I always tell people, something, this is why you're taking notes, but we always tell you how to find our guests afterwards. So if you happen to have missed the episode last week that I had on episode 76 with Paul Molson, who is a veteran investment expert who really has wrote this fantastic book called The Capital Offense, Why Some Benefit at Your Expense. Fantastic book. He also has a blog that you can follow as well. And the reason I love that is because the blog gives you all this knowledge on a continual basis. And the book just brings a lot of concepts together. One of the things he talked about, and people came back and gave me great feedback, and they said, Maya, I didn't realize there was a difference between the idea of money and capital. Now think about that. Money and capital are not the same thing. And Paul did a fantastic job of breaking that down for us in that episode. So I'm doing something new with the show as well. And people will be like, oh, you're adding all these little bells and whistles. To make it easy to find things, in the upper corner, for me, it is my upper left. Not sure, so it's going to be your right. If you scan that QR code, it will take you to Paul's blog, as well as how to purchase his book that he has that's on Amazon and all kinds of other places. So you can always scan that QR code and you'll be able to connect with Paul, sign up for his blog, which is absolutely 100% free. It's a written blog as well as there's an audio version as well. So go ahead and scan that QR code and you will be able to connect with Paul and all of the financial information he's giving. That to me is something that if financial literacy is not top of your list or not top of mind, shame on you, because it really needs to be. So you can always start here. Don't wait till the new year, everybody. Start right now. Scan that QR code and check out what Paul is sharing with everybody. Okay, so with that being said, so now you know how to find former episodes. I am super excited to have on our next guest. And the thing is, many of the guests have come out just finding out about my podcast, and they reach out and express wanting to be on the show, which makes me feel extra special because I'm not famous. So I love when people reach out and want to share, but I do have to say I have some great followings for all the people that I'm picking up, not just in the US that are watching, but we have some newcomers on board as well internationally. I'm liking the fact that people are starting to embrace the idea of mental wellness. And what do I tell everybody about mental wellness? It is not just about how you think and how you feel, it is, but how you think and how you feel is going to impact every aspect of your life. So that financial decision that you make, even how you decide to vote, is going to be fueled by how you think and how you feel. So I'm trying to get people out of that comfort zone of thinking that mental health is just about the idea of depression and anxiety. And if you ever needed tools, you need them now to decipher a lot of things that are happening within the United States at the moment. And I always say, what's more important, being informed versus being influenced? Because when you're influenced, you're out to make a lot of choices that are not really going to resonate with who you are. Or maybe you just don't understand enough. Well, our next guest is absolutely amazing. And in today's world, just attempting, let's be honest, to even be able to get news that you actually want to hear becomes difficult. Well, guess what? Our next guest is going to help you with that. Kira Shishkin is ultimately the most amazing person for me information-wise, because once I dove into informed.com, it blew me away, because one of the things for me that I was having burnout with was just too much news. And it was too much influenced or biased news for me. So I got to the point where I stopped watching news on a regular basis, but I also start saying to other people, you know something, why don't you take a break from the news? Because I understand that can heighten your depression or anxiety, or if you're struggling like with the government shutdown, that was very stressful for people. And so what they were getting in the news, I'll be honest, was not really all that transparent or honest. Well, guess what? I'm about to share a resource with you that's going to change that. This informed.com is a news concierge service that is designed specifically, they would say, for leaders, but I'm going to say it's for those people who want to be informed and they don't want biased or influenced news. Kira is passionate about helping people, but more importantly about overcoming that information overload that I frequently talk about with people, to get the essentials without the typical noise of media. And media has become very loud at this point for many people. At Informed, he has focused on building a minimalist approach, so which means gonna eliminate the clickbait, the ads, but more importantly, the bias that so much of the news you get. And Informed is delivered by AI, but also humans. So you're getting a human touch in there as well. So without further ado, let's bring to the ambition stage, Kira Shishkin. Welcome to M.A.Y.A. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's delightful to be welcomed on your show, M.A.Y.A.
Yes. So first of all, I cannot tell you that you finding me, which I love, came in a nick of time, because I was really getting to the point, Kira, where I was having just information burnout. And I didn't even feel like it was truly good information. It was just an overload of just a lot of stuff that I don't have time within my day, honestly, to sort out facts all the time about things. So tell us a bit about, before you get into Informed, first tell us about you, because I like for my listeners to learn about our guests, because almost everybody is coming from a place where they have a passion that then turned into their purpose. So tell us a bit about you.
Absolutely. It would be a pleasure. I mean, I love that you phrase it as, passion turning into purpose. I think that's very relatable to sort of my journey, my path. I've had the fortune and the misfortune to grow up across a lot of information conflict. I was born and raised in Ukraine, and had almost a decade spent in Israel, where these are both some of the most some of the loudest conflicts in the world today. And I believe that all conflicts like that really begin as information conflicts in the first place. And so I've just seen misinformation, information overload as tools of manipulation, tools of misleading, and tools of overall misinformation, that has really impacted societies, really impacted generations of people. And coming to the United States about a decade ago, there really was sort of an observation of like, wow, like we really have the tools with the technology that we have, with the talent that we have, to fix the information infrastructure of our culture, of our society, to be more mindful around the media that we consume, and to be more mindful in the way that media is presented to us. And so it's been a very personal journey, sort of, between Ukraine, Israel, and the United States, that sort of, developed this passion turned into purpose of helping folks be informed without being influenced.
And what a path to getting there, because now you talked about having this really diverse background of being obviously growing up outside the US, and then obviously growing in the Ukraine and as well as Israel. So when you come here, you said you've been here for roughly about a decade, correct?
Yeah.
What was the first thing, or did you even notice how, I would say, news is disseminated in the United States versus perhaps where you see it other places? Because I've heard people flat out say they have come to prefer BBC America or even Al Jazeera watching the news than actually watching for like a global perspective, so to speak.
Right.
They prefer those outlets versus watching US news.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned. I think it's a really important, but it's so like, there is a saying that if you want to hide something from people, the best way is you put it right in front of their nose, right? You put it right in the middle of the center. And there is some sort of I wouldn't call it a conspiracy, because right, I'm not really a conspiracy guy, but there is a tendency, a trend, just a reality that we sort of wake up to. In America, we seem to be very overserved on news. So everywhere we go to a bar, we go and there's sort of, we're in a sports bar and there's sort of an anchor on TV talking about the latest events. Or we turn on any channel and there's someone talking about the news to us all the time. We go online, there's all this kind of news, really news content. And a lot of Americans, I think, tend to say, well, I know what's going on. I've seen the news, when in reality, they haven't seen the news. What they've seen is news commentary. And that's a really big distinction, right? Whether you're, interacting with primary source, kind of reporting factual information, or you're interacting with a pundit, right, who is talking about and sort of digesting and interpreting news for you. And I feel like one of the crises in America that we are most focused on, this is the one that we observe and are responding to actively with informed.now, is the idea that there is an abundance of news commentary, but there is a shortage / a poverty of factual news itself. And I think to the question around how does information get disseminated, in America, it seems to come through personality, through characters, through folks, talking heads on TV, talking about news, commenting on news. There's a lot of discussion, but there is very little just news itself, just the facts themselves. And that's part of our observation behind what we're doing.
So say someone says, okay, it sounds like I like this idea of news without noise, which is your tagline, which I love. So one, how do you, within creating informed, decide to, okay, this is worthy of reporting? How do you find your sources? How do you separate yourself out from kind of becoming more like something that's identified as, okay, even though informed is not a person, it's an app. But how do you kind of, I guess, keep that true sense of we just want to report the news. Like, where do you go for your sources?
Totally. Yeah, I feel like there's a few questions packed in what you're saying, and I'm going to try to, hit all of them. But we're essentially emulating or we're essentially doing what any person would do in their own journey of trying to get to the truth of the matter, right? So say you wake up one day and there is crazy updates, government shutdown, huge trade agreements that are affecting everyday life, prices are rising, there's inflation, unemployment, AI is, things are going crazy. And I'm not being hypothetical. This is just any day this past week, right? You
Mhm.
wake up and there's stuff going on and say like, okay, well, I need to figure out how this affects my life. I need to understand what I need to know, and I'd like to do that quickly. So you set out on this journey of reading, cross-checking a lot of different sources, trying to figure out where the commonly kind of agreed upon fact base is, what is truth and what is, bias on two different sides. You're trying to essentially distill a lot of news commentary, a lot of news content into like the base ground truth facts as to what's actually going on. And that process is extremely demanding, right? And a lot of busy people, which is all of us, right, don't have the time to spend a few hours a day sort of sieving through the noise and trying to figure out what is factual, what is bias, what is sensationalism, and what is, a faithful retelling of a story, and how do you aggregate that insight across multiple sources. We essentially do that work for you. So instead of you having to spend a couple of hours a day, which is how long it takes to figure out what the truth is, we
Mhm.
do that hard work for you with a real faithfulness, a real sort of loyalty to primary sources. So we don't just go and read the journalism layer, the journalistic layer for you. We don't just read the press. We go to the primary sources, right? Whether that's a Supreme Court case or the Bill of Congress or a United Nations proclamation or an European Union resolution. We'd look at primary sources and distill the facts from the horse's mouth instead of from the retelling, digesting, interpreting journalists. In times when we don't have a primary source, we would rely on the reporting layer, which is the folks who are on the ground collecting evidence before that evidence gets spun into, right, the CNN version of the story or the Fox News version of the story or the NBC version or the, I don't know, you pick your outlet. There is always some kind of uh, color. There's some kind of, interpretation that's put on it. And so we focus through primary sources and primary reporting on doing the research for you so that you can move on with your day and just be informed and not drained or overwhelmed or lose 3 hours of your day every day. It's too much.
That would be accurate, because if you were going to go through the due diligence of trying to fact check the things that you're reading, I mean, what you just said, cross checking, going to sources, and like you said, you're not necessarily always getting something directly from the horse's mouth. One of the things that we definitely hear within the US news, the news cycle, is that everything definitely does seem very politically driven. Whereas, you'll hear people say, oh, if it's Fox News, then it must be, Republican based, or it's going to be MAGA. And if it's, CNN or something else, MSNBC, oh, then that's more Democratic, which means instantly news stations are being pigeonholed. How, one, we're going to make the assumption, even though, I love, one of my favorite sayings is from the show Reacher, that in an investigation, assumptions can kill. So I want to retract that word and not say, but most people will assume that, well, how is it that informed is not somehow politically aligned? How would you answer that?
Yeah, and I feel like it's crazy because it's so hard to imagine for us to have a non-biased, non-political outlet, because every player in the industry has sort of succumbed to that force, whether that's through sponsorship or through advertising or some sort of other flavor of influence. Every player in the media industry, in the news media industry, has sort of succumbed to the force of political and biased sort of partisan games. And it's almost hard to imagine because there's no precedent for it. But I would actually say it's not so hard to be objective if you just stay true to the goal of, hey, like, I don't have a bias that is blue or red or any other color. I don't have a bias to share. Our whole mission has always been to be objective, neutral, and credible, reliable. And as soon as you accept bias into your sort of journalism, you lose credibility, at least with half the people, and if not with more than that. And so for us, it almost feels like it's never been hard to be neutral because we've never had the goal to convince anyone of anything. How does this practically work out? One is we look at the most essential facts. We're not looking to sort of tell you what it means. Sometimes we offer context, but we don't ever tell you, this is a good thing or this is a bad thing, this is scary or this is frightening or this is amazing. We just tell you the essentials, right? The news themselves without the commentary. And, people ask me all the time, what does that actually entail? It entails answers to 3 questions: just the what, the when, the where, and the context around it, right? Like maybe some basic numerical context, things that are all factual, right? So it stops short of saying how you should feel about it. It stops short of saying, is this amazing or is this terrible? It leaves the space for you, the reader, to make up your own mind. And so our reporting and the way we sort of communicate is extremely concise, right? We don't say much. We just say the things that matter, the things that you need to know, but we limit our writing on any given issue to just a couple of lines, right? And so in our concision, we give you the essentials without, bearing the risk of influencing you, without attempting to interpret the information for you. And it's a balance we've struck pretty early on that we've been rewarded by great user feedback, folks saying, hey, I really feel like this is not biased. And we haven't really struggled with that. It's unless you have this nefarious goal of trying to make people believe a certain thing, it's actually not hard to just tell people the facts.
There you go. Everyone, you're tuned into M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is episode 77. And of course, as you know, we've been rolling out something special I call the Ambition Shows, which we bring on people to the show to tell their stories about how they have taken something they were very passionate about and made it into purpose. And we know that things like that has to be driven by they're motivated and they're ambitious. And that's what we want to focus here on the podcast. So our guests in this episode, let's talk about being informed, because it's really one of my just things that drives me crazy when I hear people often saying things, Kira, that are not factual. So of course, discussing how to be informed with us is Kira Shishkin, who is the CEO of Informed.now. Well, we finally have a person who wants to contribute to the show. I appreciate this. And you too can be active in the show. If you are watching the show, you can always type your questions into the chat, whether you are watching via YouTube, we're doing Instagram, and we're also doing LinkedIn. You can type your comments and they will appear on the screen. So this listener's question for you would be this. How do you pretty much determine what is worthy of reporting? Because I guess on a daily news cycle, there can be a lot of things going on. So I guess our question is like, well, how do you decide what's relevant, what should be reported on?
Such an important question. And the central question of what we're doing is we focus on the most significant news. And the way we define significant news is actually, it sounds dramatic, but, we should focus on these things, world-changing news. So we focus on things that are changing the world actively. And we ask ourselves the question of, does this change the world or not? Or is this just, a loud story? We focus on 2 sort of sub-questions. One is how many people are being affected? And 2 is how much are they being affected? Is this an incremental change in their life? Or is this something that is, a gigantic force that's going to change their freedom, change their ability to, exercise choices, right? Be able to purchase things, be able to select between options, just have optionality. And of course, matters of life and death, if their lives are going to be threatened, if they're going to be feeling safe. And so, an easy contrast that I like to surface is an example of something that we do not think is world-changing are hyper-local tragedies, right? And this is just an example. So for example, if there is a huge bus crash or a train wreck, God forbid, in a part of India, right? It's a human tragedy. 30 people died. It's a terrible thing, and it certainly is newsworthy in that locale, and it's certainly newsworthy for so many families that are connected to the story. But when it comes to zooming out on the scale of the world, that event, albeit tragic, is not going to change the course of history. Contrast that with some of the events that have been unfolding in the last couple of weeks. The China-U.S. meeting, the arrival of the leader of Syria to the United States for a meeting with Trump, the first meeting of a Syrian and American leader since 1946. Right? These are changes that are going to shift and are actively shifting the freedom of hundreds of thousands and millions of people in the world, Americans, Syrians, all over. It's changing economic relations, right? If you're looking at trade agreements between the European Union or China and the United States, these are changing, generations worth of economic, social, cultural exchange that are going to affect so many people's lives well beyond what is a local tragedy. And so that's sort of the questioning that we go through, is how much does this change the world? And based on how much does this affect the lives of how many people?
Okay, no, that makes sense. And the thing is, I think a lot of those things do need to be reported upon, because just because it's not top of mind for someone does not mean it's something that they shouldn't know. So I know part of what also makes Inform unique is it's this collaboration between AI and obviously humans. How does that work? What does that mean?
Absolutely. We sort of, and this is part of a larger conversation about the ethics of AI, like what is AI good for, what is AI dangerous for? And I really think it's just another really powerful, maybe an overpowered tool in our hands. And I think, using it for the right purposes is really important. So in our case, I come from a background of technology, a background in artificial intelligence, and I've never had a sort of an ambiguity around it. You're going to be successful implementing a new technology if you know what it's good for and you don't expect it to do things that it's bad for. So in our case, we leverage AI to reduce the noise and increase our coverage and reading capacity well beyond human ability. So for example, contrasting with a traditional sort of news company or reporting company or a news digest company, right? If you are confined by the capacity of humans, you're not going to be able to read as much as you would need to get to truly sort of diversified, broad, cross-reference coverage. Where we leverage AI is what AI is good at, which is a set of procedures that we describe as scraping, sort of collecting information online, in doing that at a pace and at a speed that like a human team could never do, right? We're able to access and read something around 10,000 articles a day, sometimes an hour, depending on the day, and be able to see through that information and see how many times are they mentioning these events. Is there a fact that keeps repeating that seems to be the commonly agreed upon truth across any publication you look at? Is there certain words that are being used? So being able to essentially read at a larger scale. But what we don't do with AI is we don't let it make judgment decisions. We don't let it make calls that would exacerbate bias or just translate bias from its input to its output. And that's where we have what we call, the tech and talent combination. That's where we bring in the human eye, and it's a diverse team of folks who all look with one goal of, is the output of our work neutral, completely neutral? Not a language tone shift, not obviously a literal evidence curation, or even sometimes a curatorial bias around our coverage. And so we sort of bring in the AI for the grunt work, stuff that is really hard for humans to do successfully and at scale and quickly. But then we remain with our human judgment towards the most sort of editorial part of actually making sure that there isn't just bias being carried through by the machine, and that we're able to, lend that human eye, which is really important, especially when it's diversified, when it's not a single person, but multiple people, and every single person has the same goal of objectivity, but they come through a slightly different lens of like, okay, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I am gay, I am straight, I am white, I am, person of color. It has that sort of, multiple layers of defense, or rather of constructivity.
Okay. Let's see, another question. It kind of falls in line with what we're talking about here. They wanted to know, it sounds like, does informed.com create custom news based on user interest? So it sounds like they're saying, can they select maybe what they want to, I
Yeah,
guess, give updates about?
we get that question so much. One thing I'll mention, it's informed.now, not informed.com, for anyone who is looking to see our website, which has a lot more information about sort of our work and our mission. We are currently focusing on our flagship product, which is sort of the global citizen coverage, but it is sort of angled for an American, right? So it's we serve nationwide America. We're the largest news by text toll-free number in the US, and we've also gone live in Canada. So we sort of serve the American who views herself as a global citizen, right? So we sort of focus on a curation of world-changing global news. We are currently also developing, and some of these are already live, thematic focuses, right? So for example, informed.now healthcare, informed.now technology, informed.now
Nice.
real estate. These are in limited access right now to kind of our VIP base. I mean, if anyone is interested in testing our products before we release them, we are very, very glad. But we do not, importantly, we do not let a user handpick exactly the type of content they will see in their text. So we don't do like hyper personalization. We do kind of thematic customization that you can opt into, but you cannot hyper personalize based on your own individual view. And this happens for a couple of reasons. One is we are still in the middle of this debate as a team and as a company, whether that would be creation of echo chambers that is already a huge issue online, and is that something we want to facilitate? And two is our bar for quality of editorial and accuracy is so high, and it goes through not just the technological but also a human process, that personalizing at a scale of every single individual, and we have a lot of subscribers, would be very difficult for us to sustain the quality that we are absolutely not looking to sacrifice.
No, I mean, that would probably be quite a task to try to like tailor everything to what a person interest might be. So it sounds like what you're really reporting, like you said, you're a global citizen, top of mind, to kind of go from there. Another person posed a question, is it free, subscription based, kind of how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we because we don't have any advertisements, we don't have any sponsors, which
Nice.
is exactly how we're able to stay true to the reader, right, and to the reader alone. As a result, we refuse any sort of revenue from an advertiser, any
Got you.
sort of revenue from a sponsor, or anyone who would sort of bring in an interest of their own and insist that, hey, I'm paying you money, I'm sponsoring your content, so you must write about red politics or about blue politics or about these issues or about those issues. Because we refuse all those influences, we only accept revenue from our user, because that's the way that incentive-based we can align our interests only with the interests of our readers. And so the way it works literally is it's free to join, it's free to start, it's free to see for yourself. And it's very easy. You just click one link on our website, and it puts you in a week-long free trial that shows you the power of facts, shows you the power of factual information, and how easy it can be to access it through informed.now. And then if you feel like, hey, this is actually an influence I'd like to have in my life, this is the way I'd like to consume information, then we ask for a subscription. And our subscriptions are $9 a month, so it's $8.99, which winds up being about $100 a year. But we like to think of ourselves as the last new subscription you'll ever need, because our coverage cuts across every other coverage of every other news organization, essentially. And so if you, for example, were choosing a news service, if you go for the New York Times, you're only going to get a very very particular coverage of what they think is important, their kind of take on things. If you go for the Wall Street Journal or Washington Post, you'll get that. And so if you want to have a balanced perspective, you're going to have to combine a couple of subscriptions, all of which are sort of more expensive than us. We are both the cheapest and the broadest, so to speak, service. And not to mention, we save the most time because our whole goal is to give you back the time, try to take up the least amount of attention while still giving you the value, versus with any other kind of information service, you're playing the game against each other. You want to get informed and get out, while they want to hold you, they want to clickbait you, and they want to hold you for as long as possible.
Actually, I like that you like, they want to, kind of hold you hostage. You want to get informed and get out. I like that. It's true. You want your news simple, clean, without all of the extra commentary that might come with it. And one of the things that I have to say is, and people should expect that if there are no ads, none of those kind of things, there's no clickbait, which means, like you said, the reason you see those things most of the time, they're revenue generation for anybody generally who is using them. And I do think that it's really important to understand that this, to me, for $9 a month, let's be honest, you almost pay more than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Seriously. And it's not informing you about anything. So I always tell people, the minute you want to say they think it's too much, I'm going to say, if you are a person, like you said, this is for leaders. This is for people who want to be informed, looking for their news to be simple and clean and not all the clutter and the noise, then $9 is nothing to spend. I feel like the person who would haggle about that is probably the person who is not all that serious about news. But I feel like the news people, who really want, hey, I just absolutely want to experience this. Give me the top things that, overnight, maybe that people were talking about. That's what I want to know. And then I can decide to do further research based on what was provided on the informed.now app. By the way, guys, obviously you see a QR code at the top of the screen. If you scan that, it'll take you right to being able to, sign up for Inform. And like you said, there's a week free trial. So you're not committing to anything. It's you sign up, you try it, and if you like you got, your nuggets of news, I'm assuming, is it kind of more of a morning delivery of the text? Because this is purely text, right?
Yeah, you get to pick what time you'd like to receive the text. And we should also mention, Maya, I feel like we've neglected this, but the news comes to you by text, right? So it isn't an application or a website. The news that you get is SMS texted to you. So instead of going through the motions of having to go to a website, click around, do eye acrobatics around advertisements and pop-ups, and now you have to remove your ad blocker, and now you have to click here, and then you have to, there's a video pop-up. Instead of doing this kind of hunt for the news, or which some people appreciate if they have a lot of free time, news comes to you. And as it comes to you, it has already been reduced away from bias, away from clickbait, no sort of solicitations of advertisements or anything of the kind. And it's completely privacy respecting. No one's going to be asking you to accept cookies or accept tracking or, sell your browsing history to this website. Nice. It's completely privacy preserving. And actually, a lot of our users are anonymous. So we don't actually know anything about them beyond their phone number. And we don't need to, because we don't sell information. We will never violate your privacy. The way we're designed is intentionally to, give you the value while taking the least from you, taking the least attention. And so it brings me back to this conversation about value, right? Is sometimes someone, when they hear about our service, they're like, what? Paying $9 for news? I would never do that. That's ridiculous. I get news for free. It's like, you don't get news for free. You get news. You get news commentary for free. But getting news is actually, quite expensive, and you're paying for that news commentary with your time, with your attention, and often with an emotional cost, right? An emotional response, outrage, anger, fear, which most news commentary works overtime to try to stoke.
And you said something I think that people have probably said to themselves: why do I get so many what feels like spam emails? Because ultimately you've gone someplace, you took the clickbait, and boom, now your information has been put out there, and now you're getting all these emails about, different things that you don't want. And I love the idea about the privacy piece to this, that you go in, it's pretty simple. You plug in your phone number. It sounds like it's the only information you're asked to get, and it doesn't go anywhere from there. So you don't have to worry about all of a sudden you're going to start to get all these advertisements or these different things coming through your text, which often can happen when you sign up for things. So that piece of for $9, like nothing is really free. So granted, you may have felt you were getting something for free because you were reading it, but ultimately, as you were the consumer, that person, whoever was producing whatever it is that you're consuming, had to find a way to get paid for it. So this is just very clear and authentic. It's like, and it's no different than people, for instance, who still love to buy a newspaper. So like I said, I think you know your audience, and I think you thought well about this. Like, this isn't going to be for everybody necessarily. It's going to be for those people that really want to be informed. They're definitely news people. They're the people who probably still buy their Sunday paper, if you can find one these days, you know what I mean? But I think it's important, and you're clear about this isn't for everybody. But I'd like to say, if you decided you want to kind of up your information and news game, this is a really good place to start. And you can start that first week for free and say, something, everything that I got, this worked for me. It kind of set me down the path to do more research. So scan the QR code that's right there. Try it out for a week. This is called the call to action, everybody. As you can see scrolling at the bottom of the screen, informed.now, you can go ahead and go there, as well as it looks like, if I remember correctly, you can text hello to 844-406-4636 as well. And then that can start the process for you as well. So there's plenty of ways that people can try this out, for no cost to them. It's not going to cost you anything. It's totally free coming out the gates. And then you say to yourself, in today's climate, with everything that's going on, and as I tell people, you got to quiet down how much you're taking into your life on a daily basis, especially with the news. Because unfortunately, and it's true, and I think most people get this, that news for most people at this point has almost become anxiety driven. That, it's whether we're trying to figure out how to get out of the government shutdown, so imagine the person who's tuning in because maybe they lost their SNAP benefits, or maybe that the person who, has a federal job and isn't going. They're kind of tied to the news because they need to know what's going on more often than not. And other people want to know what's going on because, like you said, they are global citizens. And when you're a global citizen, you do want to know what's going on in the rest of the world. And that's why I asked you, how do you feel about how we report news here, especially the Ukraine and Israel? Okay. How do you feel about, because most Americans can only consume what they see in front of them. I always tell people it's probably not everything you think it is. You should probably dive a little deeper. So even on those two subjects, when you look at the news, how would you grade, let's say, how the U.S. is reporting on the Ukraine? Let's start with that.
Well, it's so hard. I mean, first of all, I love all the things you mentioned. I mean, it's like what we're trying to do is in many ways revive the dignity of being informed, because it is a dignity, and it's a global citizen dignity that's been robbed of American people, of the everyday American, right? Because the rich executive, right, the people that have a lot of resources to spend on information, they actually have, information services that are very powerful, right? That don't look anything like the news that the everyday American gets. So we're looking to give the power of facts and the power of like information services designed for the reader to the everyday American, which has been robbed of factuality, it's been robbed of facts. And it's very unfortunate. So it's a real multiple generations affected by this. And so we're looking to give that power to the everyday American, and it's sort of a lost art, right? When the everyday person looks at the coverage on Ukraine, on Israel, there's so much sensationalism, right? Israel did something terrible, right? Or Gaza is experiencing, something dramatic, right? Or Ukraine, Russia is this new escalation of aggression. Ukraine is doing X, Y, Z. It's very hard because it's sort of like sometimes you just look at the headlines and you realize, if you just take a step back, this article never means to inform me. This article is looking to trigger me. This is trigger news. It's trying to evoke fear, anger, and generally put outrage, right? And so, I can't comment so directly on saying like the way, American outlets are reporting on Israel, Gaza, and Ukraine, Russia it's hard to say because they're all doing it in different ways through different kind of, color lenses, red, blue, etc., the political kind of color. But they are all guilty of the same sensationalism. And I think that is like an even greater sin than having bias. Like, it's okay if you have a perspective as an outlet, you get to talk about the issue in your own light. You get to have the bias that you bring. You should be transparent about it, but you have the right to be a biased publication, right? You'll attract some people, you will repel others. That's okay. But the sensationalizing that happens across, every side of the political, social, cultural spectrum, that everything is being dramatic, everything is being, life and death, and that I think is a really toxic, and in a very it's a guilt across the board of the reporting and the journalistic layer. It's a real guilt, and I think that is almost a bigger problem to be solved, the sensationalizing of everything, than the bias piece. As long as you're transparent about bias, people can opt into your bias or not. But sensationalism is malicious because people can't really tell, okay, is this actually the worst thing in the world, or is this just being overly dramatized to be that? And I think that's the kind of the primary issue with all news, but especially with the two loudest conflicts of the world right now.
And what I like about what you just said, which is probably a good place to kind of to leave it, is that ultimately everyone should be sitting in the seat where they're making the decision about how they feel about what is being reported. And I would say, hopefully everyone at least at some point realized that, there's three sides to the coin. There's not just two. And so if you're looking to be a person who's more informed versus just being influenced by what you're hearing, you'll dig a little deeper and find out more to the story. And people are often very surprised, Kira, when they do, like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I'm like, well, you know why you didn't know it? Because most of the time they realize if they bury something in print, people won't go looking for it. Because they say, if you don't want people to be informed, just put it in print, and they won't read it because people just don't like to read anymore. They just like to have people talk and tell them, what's going on versus putting the due diligence into educating themselves about it. So you have now provided a tool that people have within a lot of their control. It looks like there's another question we can take before we close up. Well, okay. I can ask you this question, but but you know what? This is a fair question. And this might be a question because people are feeling probably maybe a little money sensitive right now with things that are going on. Sure. So they're asking if the subscription can be monthly or is it an annual commitment? So it sounds like they're saying, do I have to pay for it all up front, or can I just can I subscribe to it monthly?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually only do monthly commitments to, again, give you the power to decide, right? I think annual contracts are a little, I don't know. There are weird kind of pressure that we are not interested in putting on our users. So we've actually always done monthly subscriptions. That's our default option, and you should be able to change your mind whenever and not feel like you are being strung along and being kind of held hostage. Like, we're not in the business of keeping anyone against their will. So all our subscriptions are monthly. And I should also mention, because I think, we've been getting this question a good amount recently, because people are sensitive about money, and we are going through financial contortions in this country right now.
Yes.
So I should mention, if folks are really, as you go through the free trial and you're feeling like you want the power of facts, and you're a few dollars short, and $9 is a lot for you, which I understand, just text us. We have a line of communication with every single user. That's how we sort of talk to you. You can just text back saying, hey, like, I'm in a place where I have financial needs right now, and I'm not able to afford, but I would like to have the power of the service. And we can offer sort of a discount for folks who really want to use Informed, but don't feel that they can pay the full price. We are not, we don't play capitalist like that. So we are happy to help and make it accessible to folks if they're sensitive about the price point.
See, that right there speaks so much volumes. that you don't want people to not have the opportunity to be informed and to have access to a tool that can really help them to kind of navigate sometimes what are very difficult waters when you're trying to be an informed person. You know, you're not, and I love the fact you're like, no, no annual subscriptions. We're not trying to pigeonhole people. See, that right there can tell people like your passion, your purpose are so closely aligned that you really want to give people the opportunity to have access to information. And that sounds like a crazy thing to say, like people should have access to information, but I'm talking about, let me rephrase that, good information, not just, there's a lot of, you know, information being pumped out there to people that does not mean it's necessarily good. And I like that, again, you're putting the control back in the user's hands, like, hey, we don't want that to be the reason you can't afford to be informed. Any parting thoughts for our listeners? You've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it means a lot. And I really think, just jumping on what you were sharing, it's we're designing an experience to help you make up your own mind. We are proudly the only media company, media service that has been designed from the very beginning with the reader only in mind, and with the sort of mission. And it's really a public service mission that's been sort of masqueraded as a company, but it's really very much like a public service mission to just give folks an option to make up their own mind on anything, on everything, without having it made up for them, having that perspective imposed on them. We give you the power to make up your own mind, and everything we do is in service of that goal. And so if it feels like it speaks to you and you feel like you want to join us on this media mindful mission, on this sort of power of facts mission, I welcome you to, you know, get in touch, join us. Maya mentioned a couple of ways to learn more about us. It's through our website, which is informed.now, or text our number directly. The toll-free number is 844-406-INFO, which is the same as 844-406-4636. Right, and so many numbers. I know I said too many numbers, but we look forward to finding our people on this journey.
Thank you. I love that. You know, just the idea that the bringing back integrity in media. Everyone, this has been Kira Shishkin, CEO of Informed.now. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. So everybody, this was episode 77, highly informative. So a couple things, our takeaways. One, being informed is what we choose and what we want to be here when we listen to Maya, my ambition and your ambition. So ways to connect with informed.now. Obviously, you can scan the QR code that's at the top of the screen. I'm trying to make things a little bit easier for people as we kind of move through and we do different things. I know it's not always easy, but as Kira mentioned, you can always text hello to 844-406-INFORMED, info, which happens to be 4636, which I didn't even notice that when I was putting this together. And of course, you can always, if you happen to be sitting at your computer and right now it's just easier to kind of jump on the web, you can go to www.informed.now and sign up. Remember, this is all text-based. So even if you jump on and you sign up, moving forward, you're going to get your information from them via text and no other way. And look, you can even ask questions back. When was the last time someone wanted to inform you, but also still give you an outlet to be able to ask questions or to get more information? So that part is so key. So I'll put up my last graphic. For those people who are visual, because I know my people, some people are more visual than others. Here you go, right here. You know, go ahead. You can take a picture of that. If you didn't do the QR code, which will take you right there, same thing. It's informed. It's news without noise. And if you're like me right about now, that's exactly what I need in my life. I don't know about you. So we're wrapping up this episode. Make sure we're actually doubling up this week on Saturday. We're going to actually have episode 78, and we're going to have on Letitia Pearson, who, granted, she's a reality star, but I say this loosely because she's a reality star because she created this show called The Bell Collective that airs on the OWN network, which is the Oprah network. And she's also the founder of the Women Brunch Foundation. The thing that's so unique about this particular sitcom or this reality show, and I'm not really a reality show person, I will tell you this, is that it's one based in a place you least expect, Jackson, Mississippi. I promise you, Jackson, Mississippi, I'm not throwing shade at you. I am not. But if you've ever been there, you kind of go, It's not a lot going on. Well, until I actually had a chance to meet Letitia and talk to her about what's going on, she has a mission to bring back something called Farish Street, which used to be a prominent area in Jackson before the Great Migration of actually African Americans from the South, which happened between like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then a lot of people left Jackson coming north. Matter of fact, quite a few of them landed in Chicago, believe it or not. She has this mission to kind of revitalize that area. But what her show is focused on, this isn't banter about a lot of women wanting to be catty and messy. She brought in women in Jackson, Mississippi that are entrepreneurs, and how they are themselves revitalizing Jackson and bringing kind of a new image and letting people know it's not the place that it used to be. So she herself does these women brunches that started in Jackson, but now she goes around the country and it's about empowerment for women. So she does that. She also has a mental health therapist on there who has her own practice that's grown. She's a radio host. She has quite a few. She's a dentist. She has all these women who have pretty much taken their passion, aligned it with their purpose, and they're doing big things in Jackson. So definitely, check it out. Again, I'm not a reality show person, but I'm season 3 in. They're in season 6. And I have to say, there's some moments in there I'm like, come on, ladies. But outside of that, it's really interesting watching how these women really have built what for many of them has turned into like empires. And it's really interesting coming out of Jackson, Mississippi. So make sure you tune in this Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time. And Letitia Pearson will be our guest telling us about the Bell Collective and things that she's been doing and what her passion and purpose are as well. So everyone, as you know, I always say thank you for listening to this episode. I said the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you to identify your ambition, harness that motivation to help you acquire the success and satisfaction you seek, not just in life, but I want you to focus on your everyday life. Remember, you can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A anywhere there is a podcast platform. You're going to find me. So it can be on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audibles, Spotify. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Of course, you can always listen to episodes of the show at my website, maya-speaks.com. Make sure you check out my 2 blogs I'm highly passionate about, my weekly inspiration blog, as well as my blog that's focused on menopause, which is me on pause, a little play on words there. Of course, the easy way too is if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll always know when there's an episode coming up. And I managed to get myself together because my YouTube channel, along with all my other social media plans, are all M.A.Y.A Speaks to You. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, as well as X and Way Society, because a lot of things are very biased. And here we want you to be informed and not influenced. So until next time, everyone, I always say this. Remember, your present becomes your past and your future is no more. Those are not my words. I stole them from Pearl Jam. It's one of my favorite groups. Love the song it comes from. So make the most of every day. So stay safe. That's the key thing. Be well. And as I love to always say to people, just keep being amazing. Be you and don't worry about what you're not. Just enjoy who you are right now. That's what matters the most. All right, everybody. Until next time. Ciao.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.